Good afternoon, CORF. Thank you for joining me for this week's video update. I hope you've all been having a great week and are looking forward to going into the weekend. Just a few quick announcements for you. Tomorrow night, Saturday, we'll be having our usual Saturday night worship service at Grace at 5:30 in West Hampton. We will be having the pleasure this week of hearing from Jonathan, which I'm so excited about. I always love when Jonathan comes and brings the word. He always just shares from such a deep place in his heart. And I have the pleasure and joy, along with the youth group, of being able to just hear Jonathan's heart every week at youth group as he just interacts with the students and just really mentors them and just shows them what it means to be a man after God's own heart. So I'm just really looking forward to this opportunity for all of us to hear from Jonathan as he brings the word tomorrow. So if you are able, please join us in person tomorrow night at 5:30. If you're not able to join us in person, we would love to have you on our live stream, whether it be on Facebook or YouTube. Again, that is starting at 5:30. Next week, we have a few different things happening. On Wednesday, we'll be having our Bible study, which will be taking place at Tom and Joanne's. And as usual, we'll be having our 5:30 dinner before Bible study, which, again, just Tom and Joanne have been such a blessing in not only opening up their home to us to have Bible study, but in just being willing to serve us every other week with just a meal and a chance to fellowship and just to sit down and just kind of share our hearts with each other as we prepare to go into Bible study. So if you are able to join us, we would love to have you at dinner at 5:30. If not, Bible study begins at 7 p.m. If you're not able to join us, we do have a Zoom link, but please message us for that if you would like to join Bible study via Zoom. And then next week on Friday, we'll be having our next Brothers in Fellowship meeting, which will be taking place at the Mengi's house from 6:30 to 8:30. And next Friday, the guys will have the pleasure of hearing from Noah, which he'll be sharing his story. And again, Noah is another one of the youth leaders. And so he comes and shares with our students every week. He actually grew up through the youth group and is now being able to give back and serve to those middle school and high school students now as he now prepares for what's next in his life. And so I'm excited for you guys to be able to hear what Noah has to share with you next Friday. If you have any questions about the Brothers in Fellowship, please see David, Mengi, or PJ, and they'll be sure to get you all the information that you need. That concludes our announcements for this week. But before we close, I just want to share a brief message with you guys. It's from Ezekiel. If you, like me, and you looked ahead in our Bible plan, you saw that at the end of August, we'll be starting to read Ezekiel. And when I saw that this week, it immediately took me back to one of my favorite passages in Ezekiel, which is Ezekiel 37. And that actually is one of the passages that God used to really draw me to Burlington. And so I just want to share a few of those verses with you tonight. It's Ezekiel 37, verses 1 through 14, which says, "The Lord took hold of me, and I was carried away by the Spirit of the Lord to a valley filled with bones. He led me all around among the bones that covered the valley floor. They were scattered everywhere across the ground and were completely dried out. Then he asked me, 'Son of man, can these bones become living people again?' 'O sovereign Lord,' I replied, 'you alone know the answer to that.' Then he said to me, 'Speak a prophetic message to these bones and say, dry bones, listen to the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Look, I'm going to put breath into you and make you live again. I will put flesh and muscles on you and cover you with skin. I will put breath into you and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord.' So I spoke this message just as he told me. Suddenly, as I spoke, there was a rattling noise across the valley. The bones of each body came together and attached themselves as complete skeletons. Then as I watched, muscle and flesh form over the bones, then skin formed to cover their bodies, but they still had no breath in them. Then he said to me, 'Speak a prophetic message to the winds, son of man. Speak a prophetic message and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, O breath from the four winds. Breathe into these dead bodies so they may live again.' So I spoke the message as he commanded me, and breath came into their bodies. They all came to life and stood up on their feet, a great army. Then he said to me, 'Son of man, these bones represent the people of Israel. They are saying, we have become old, dry bones. All hope is gone. Our nation is finished. Therefore, prophesy to them and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. O my people, I will open your graves of exile and cause you to rise again. That I will bring you back to the land of Israel. When this happens, O my people, you will know that I am the Lord. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live again and return home to your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done what I said. Yes, the Lord has spoken. I love this passage. Just thinking about Ezekiel staring out into this valley of dry bones. I think sometimes often we might hear this passage, or we might sing songs that have been inspired by this passage as if they are our anthem or our war cry. But when I think about this passage, when I read this passage, I don't think Ezekiel was staring out into this valley of dry bones, ready for battle, that he was all pumped up, ready to keep on going. And even the people of Israel, when they heard his message, because we have to keep in mind that the people of Israel were in exile in this moment, they were enslaved. And Ezekiel faces this valley of dry bones. Now, I often too think of myself, if I was faced with a valley of dry bones, I would not be standing there in anticipation and excitement, knowing what might happen, knowing what God might do. I would just see this valley of dry bones. I would see death. I would see what I thought was not possible. There was probably a lot of feelings of hopelessness and maybe even defeat within Ezekiel, maybe within the people of Israel. But one of my favorite songs that is inspired by this passage is by Casting Crowns, called Spirit Winds. And after it talks about the valley of dry bones, it gives this picture of a pastor staring out into his congregation, and it says that they were once a mighty army for the Lord, but now he stares into their lifeless eyes. And then they pose this questions that the pastor must have been thinking. They said, "What are you fighting for?" And that's a question I often ask myself. What am I fighting for? In those moments when I feel hopeless, when I feel defeated, when I feel like I am just surrounded by the impossible, what am I fighting for? There are times in my life when I am sure that I am fighting for God's glory, when I am fighting for redemption. But what are we fighting for when we are in those moments when we feel defeated, when we feel like victory won't come, when we feel hopeless, when we feel like our prayers are going not just unanswered, but unheard? The song continues on. And obviously we can see here too with Ezekiel, when faced with all of this, he doesn't just sit down and become quiet. He does what the Lord has commanded. And in the song, it says that he was driven by the calling that God placed on his life. Sometimes I think we think our calling is all dependent on the job that we have, on where we live, on who we married, or all these more tangible things. But we're all called to the same calling. We're all called to glorify Christ in everything that we do and say. We're all called to be part of the work of redemption, to enter into the work that God is already doing in and around us. But he wants us to come broken. He wants us to come weary. He wants us to cry out to them in those moments when we do not understand what's happening, when we feel defeated, when we feel frustrated. And in this passage here, he reminds us that restoration is still possible. That even when all we might see is a valley of dry bones, to hold on, to keep fighting, to keep being reminded of what he called us to do, to be reminded of what we were fighting for when this all began. Because restoration is possible, even when it looks impossible. But we have to remember that while restoration is possible, Israel still had to go through exile. They still had to go through slavery. They still had to go through being away from their home. And so while restoration is possible, sometimes our prayers are not always answered in the way that we expected, in the way that we think they should be. But we can trust that God is in control. Like I shared about last week, sometimes we forget about whose job it is to be in control. It's not our job. It's Christ's job. And even when we don't get our way, even when plans don't go according to how we expect, I just want to encourage you this week to remember that restoration is possible. To ask yourself, what are you fighting for? and to remind yourself of the calling that we have all been given, to be a part of glorifying Christ and to be a part of redemption. I don't know where you might find yourself on this Friday night or Saturday morning, whenever you might be watching this, but don't lose hope. Don't let the feeling of defeat crush you. Turn your eyes on the one who is in control. Come to him broken, come to him weary, cry out to him. Restoration is possible. Have a great night, and I hope to see you all tomorrow night, whether in person or on the live stream.